It's the pre-playoff edition and episode number 22 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. He is Richard Griffin. Call him Griff. He's coming to you from Oakville, Ontario, Canada. I'm Scott MacArthur. You can call me Scotty Mac. And I'm coming to you from Halifax, Nova Scotia on Monday, October the 2nd, the full day off before the Blue Jays and the Minnesota Twins kick off their best of three, could be a two game, but best of three wild card playoff series. Griff, after all the consternation, after all the doubt, after all the elation and the ecstasy, the frustration and the worry, they got in. The Toronto Blue Jays are a playoff team for the third time in 4 years.
Yeah, and what we've been saying, what we were predicting as a target win total wasn't even close. 91 wins. I mean, if they had got to 91, it would have been comfortable. But here's a couple of 89s getting in, and it's crazy that that's the way the season ended up. But it does, to me, show that the extra wild card positions create more competition down the stretch in September. And I think that accounts for the low win total to reach the playoffs, especially in the National League, but also in the American League.
Yeah, I had people texting me or messaging me on Facebook Messenger, even one or two public posts. So are they going to get in? This was like after the loss on Friday night. Are they going to get in? I'm like, well, do the math. That they're in clear good shape here. Like you just got to win a ball game, or you need the Seattle Mariners to lose a ball game. And it turns out on Saturday, both things happened. Right? Yeah, they were always in good shape in the final 2 weeks.
Yeah, I got criticized on social media, on my own social media, about suggesting that they backed in to a playoff spot. But there's no denying that that's what happened, because there were situations where they lost a crucial game and it's woe is us. And then all of a sudden, two of the other contenders lose that same day. And now they're still in that second wild card spot by a half game. And like, congratulations to the Jays for getting in. But to say that they didn't back in or use the misfortune or the bad play of other teams to reach this point of going to Minneapolis and playing on Tuesday, you can't deny that that's what happened.
Well, look, I mean, it's a 162 game season, and you've been very clear on how you felt about the whole thing as we've gone along here. And I've been very clear on how I feel, and none of my positions have changed, but it is a reminder that it is a 162 game season. The Jays looked dead in the water after they got swept in a 4-game series at home by the Texas Rangers in early September. And the crowd turned on them. And the final 2 games of that 4-game series were blowouts. And what happened? They came to the park the next day to kick off a series against the Boston Red Sox over the weekend. And the Blue Jays swept the Red Sox at the very same time Texas took that 4-game sweep momentum and got swept themselves. That same weekend, the Jays swept the Red Sox, and the standings flipped again. And the Jays never looked back in terms of being in a playoff spot. So it just, that's how it goes.
Yeah, that was such a crazy turn of events, that Cleveland sweep of the Rangers after they had just come into Rogers Center and swept 4. But I also don't think it's a stretch for us to maintain, and we've said it all along, that this Blue Jays team has not captured the hearts of fans the way they did in 2015 and 2016. And you know, you just look at the attendance. They got over 3 million, and congratulations to the Jays. They got over 3 million, which is a tremendous accomplishment for the 7th time in club history. But it's a different feel at the ballpark, a different feel in the stands. You mentioned it a minute ago about the booing that they received, and you know, Anthony Bass early in the season deserved his boos. I think that probably 3 or 4 times in the last 10 days, the last 10 home games, it happened again. But, you know, fans have expectations, and this team somehow offensively was not meeting them. Pitching and defense got them there. But that's an adjustment that this fan base has to make. This is no longer the 2015-16 offensive juggernaut.
Right. And again, there's a significant, this isn't necessarily fair specifically to Vlad or to Bo, or although they're all paid well, and they're paid well because there are a lot of eyeballs on them. And that's the nature of being a public figure in a professional sport. But the Blue Jays have a more than adequate hype machine behind them. And when the players over 162 games don't necessarily meet what has been hyped leading into the season and what was continued to be hyped during the season, you're going to get frustrated people. That said, they are here. They're going to Minneapolis, and you and I have an exciting announcement that we want to share before we get any further here and start to break down the series, Griff.
So I was going to say, speaking of hype machines, let's go.
Yeah, we're hyping. Well, the funny thing is because we plan all this stuff out, and I said, Griff, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate our plans for the playoffs. And here we are like 10 minutes into the podcast, and I haven't done it yet, which is no surprise given the fact that I run my mouth as I am right now. So I'm going to shut up long enough to start speaking again and hype this. So youtube.com/exit philosophy. Most of our listenership is on the audio platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We always remind you that we have a YouTube page, youtube.com/exit philosophy. The Blue Jays playoff games start at 4:38 on Tuesday, October 3rd, and Wednesday, October the 4th. Tentatively scheduled for game 3 at the same time on Thursday, October 5th, although there may not be a game 3, or that game may be played a little bit later on if it's the only one, because it would end up in prime time if it's the only one. But 4:38 for games 1 and 2. Griff and I will go live on our YouTube page, youtube.com/exit philosophy, immediately when each and every Blue Jays playoff game ends. And we will have watched the games, obviously. We'll have been in communication with each other during the games. We'll have taken notes. We'll have our thoughts. We'll break it down, give you objective analysis. We'll have some laughs. I don't think we'll cry, but we will reflect the mood of the room if that's what it takes. And we'll also involve you because there's an open chat page, a live scrolling chat as we go. So we'll take your questions, take your comments. Really look forward to interacting with you after each and every Blue Jays playoff game live on youtube.com/exit philosophy.
I'm looking forward to it. I've never done anything like this, but you're the professional. You're the radio guy, and I'm counting on you to make this thing sing and hum. And I'm really looking forward to interacting with our listeners. I mean, I get messages and texts and direct messages from them, and it'd be nice to be able to sort of have a back and forth. And we'll do that after every Blue Jays playoff game right through the World Series.
All right, so 4:38 is the first pitch for both games.
You didn't say anything about right through the World Series.
Yeah, I skipped right over that one, Griff. I mean, hey, if they get in, if they continue to rock and roll all the way through, we're going to be here, and I'd love it. I'd be more than happy. I'd be more than happy for the city. I'd be more than happy for the country. Although I will say here, living in Halifax, because I did that event with John Gibbons and Lloyd Minster almost a month ago. Like out in Lloyd, my sense was talking to locals, like the Jays are beloved. And obviously that is proven with the Western Canadians who go down to Seattle. I'd love to see it. It would be wonderful. I know it's midweek and it's hard, especially because we didn't know they were going to Minnesota until late day yesterday. It'd be awesome if some Winnipeggers were able to sneak down to Minneapolis and scoop up some tickets for this series. Here in Halifax, Griff, there are Blue Jays fans, but there's like people here grew up with the Boston and American affiliates. And we're out in we're east of Maine, man. We're east of the East Coast of the United States. There's a contingent of Red Sox fans here. So I'm not like surrounded by Jays fever the way that I would be if I were back in Toronto or elsewhere in the country. But I do think the country rallies around the Jays entirely when we get to this point.
Yeah, and just before we continue, I've been presenting myself at the ballpark as the Blue Jays equivalent of Don Mattingly, in that Don Mattingly was the only Yankee who spent a 15-year career without going to the postseason. He joined them the year after. I think it was 81 was the last time they went. Then in 96 when they went, and his career took place between those.
Well, he did go to the playoffs in 95, but lost to the Mariners. But you're right. You're talking World Series. You're talking World Series.
So my equivalency there is that I came to Toronto and joined the Star right after the Blue Jays won the World Series in 92, 93. And now last year I was working for the club, and now I'm not. And if they win the World Series, I don't know what I would think, but that Don Mattingly equivalency rests heavily on my mind.
Well, if they win the World Series, Griff, we will openly campaign here on Exit Philosophy for you to get a ring. I mean, you're only a year removed. You're only a year removed.
We have not, with Exit Philosophy, ingratiated ourselves with.
Oh, we haven't. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, we calls them as we sees them, use guys. But here they are. They're in. And so it's exciting. And I think, we want to step back and have some fun today and do what a lot of fans are doing, because as we sit here right now, it's Monday, October the 2nd. So it's late morning where you are. It's the lunch hour, Griff. I'm an hour ahead of you where I am. And we don't know, just to be clear, we don't know the Blue Jays 26-man wild card playoff roster.
And in his office yesterday, John Schneider, or in his office on Sunday, Schneider suggested that they might not reveal the roster until Tuesday morning, which is tomorrow as we sit here. So what we are going to do is recommend and suggest that the proper course of action in the proper 26-man roster that they should carry. And if it turns out differently, then they screwed up, not us.
Right. And I think it's very thoughtful of John Schneider in the front office to let us have about 16 to 18 hours out there in the podcast ether before they announce the roster. So people can listen without knowing what the roster is and see, oh yeah, these guys are onto something or they're not onto something. I don't have any surprises on my list, Griff. And I think the only debate would be, are you going 14 position players, 12 pitchers, or are you going 13 position players, 13 pitchers? And I'm just going to step right out on a very broad ledge, feel very safe in this one from a logic perspective, and say this is a 2, potentially 3-game series. I want 14 position players and 12 pitchers. I don't need a 10-man bullpen for a 3-game series. 14 and 12 for me. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that the ability to have a 5-man bench, especially if one of the bench players is a Cam Eden who can run the bases, and you're going to need a pinch runner for Brandon Belt as a DH if he's batting second in the lineup. But having a specialty player like Cam Eden is very important. We saw that in 2015 and 2016 with the Blue Jays. But I'm with you. You don't need Hyun-Jin Ryu at all. I think he'll be left off the roster. And then Wes Parsons, who pitched yesterday after Jay Jackson was DFA'd. You definitely don't need Wes Parsons. So you're already down to 12 pitchers, and I think that's what they can do moving forward. And you can't, as you said earlier off there, you can't worry about a 17-inning extra inning game. And even if you do, you've got Yusei Kikuchi to pitch that if you've got the three right-handers scheduled for the games 1, 2, and 3.
Well, so if you had a 10-man bullpen, it would be because, Griff, you are afraid or you're planning for the possibility of a 15 or 16 or 17 inning game. Now, keep in mind the ghost runner disappears.
Thank God.
The playoffs. So there are no runners on second base to start the 10th, 11th innings now. You're playing a regular baseball game all the way through. And with respect to Bowden Francis, he's probably not the guy you want pitching in the 12th, 13th, or 14th anyway. If the situation is you get scored on, you lose the game.
Well,
right?
don't sell him short, because he had a overachieving season, or maybe a breakout season in terms of the times that he was used at the major league level. And I would trust him for a couple of innings, maybe 3 innings, if it was an extra, going against the other team that would have the same situation of being very, very deep into their bullpen. But in this 3-game series, no. When you go to best of 5, best of 7, then you got to rethink that.
Okay, so there may be some discussion around specific points, but I think the starting rotation is obvious. It's Gausman, Barrios, and Bassett. Those are your 3 starting pitchers for this wild card series. The question then becomes, what order are they going to go in? I have offered, and again, my advice is never solicited, but I have offered, based on the history of this organization, and I'm thinking specifically back to 2020, when the situation was far different. Hyunjin Ryu was clearly the Blue Jays' best pitcher, and Robbie Ray was not 2021 Cy Young Award winner. He'd just been acquired, and he piggybacked off Matt Shoemaker in game 1, blah, blah, blah. I offered, well, the notion of Kevin Gausman starting game 2, because that's either the clincher or it's the fend-off elimination to get us to the deciding game 3 game. It sounds like they're going to throw Gausman in game 1. That'll be a week between starts for him, because he last pitched on Tuesday against the Yankees. And it sounds like they're just going to roll with what they had in the Yankees series in that order. Barrios on Wednesday, Bassett on Thursday. So it will be Gausman, Barrios, Bassett. I still think the idea of Kevin Gausman pitching game 2 as either the clincher or as the savior to extend the series. He's your best pitcher. Why not continue with that mantra? But it doesn't sound like they're going in that direction.
Yeah, I would suggest that Kevin Gausman might do well against the Twins, because Edouard Julien is probably the most discerning hitter, and they got some hitters who like to be aggressive and go after pitches early in the count, and that fits into Gausman's strength, is throwing his splitter that starts in the zone and ends up out of the zone and having guys chase it. So I think that getting ahead 1-0 in the series is important. He's probably at his best among all the playoff contenders against the Twins, I would think. I mean, historically, I don't know what his record is, his 1 loss in his innings pitched and hits allowed, that sort of thing. But I think you need to pitch Barrios against his old team in his old ballpark. I think there's an extra boost of adrenaline. Maybe it wouldn't have happened last year when he was having such a horrible year, but I think this year his stuff is becoming electric. His 2-seamer that fades back to the corner of the zone. I think the umpire behind the plate, hopefully it's not Angel Hernandez or one of those guys, but I think that that's important for Barrios. But I think the adrenaline of him pitching in game 2 at Target Field is important to him, and could be beneficial for the Blue Jays because of the way that he's bounced back this season, and it would sort of be full circle for him. And if you pitch him in game 3 and Bassett in game 2, then there's a chance that Barrios would never pitch in that game. So, or pitch in that ballpark. So I think that is the correct order. We disagree on that, but what else you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is not an opinion that a hill I'm going to die on.
Oh, no, hell no.
Because the other part of it too, right, Griff, is if you do advance, you've got Gosman on regular rest for game 2 in Houston, because the winner of this series will go to Houston.
Right.
You've got Gosman for game 2 in Houston on regular rest on the Sunday, because I believe the all division series are going to begin on Saturday.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they are.
So, that the sooner you can get Gosman in, and then just doing the math here, then you could have him maybe even for game 5 of a division series, because it's off day 3-4 off. So you could even have him come back on regular rest and start the deciding 5th game in Houston if it goes that far. I'm way the hell too far down the line here, but you follow what I'm saying.
With this rotation, I don't think there's any question that they will need to have somebody go on short rest. They will not need somebody to go on short rest. So Gosman, if there's not an off day to create a game 5, then he wouldn't go in game 5. I mean, he wouldn't go on short rest. But yeah, and then other news is that we're planning on an exit philosophy after the wild card series heading into the division series. So that would likely be Friday.
Yeah. Yes. So if you're listening on the audio platforms, you're going to get more of us this week. Yeah. More of the morons this week on Friday. So we will do a wild card series wrap up, and hopefully it's a preview involving the Blue Jays of the division series with the Houston Astros. And that's coming to you on Friday. That'll drop probably at the time we usually drop, early in the afternoon on Friday. And I'll also take this opportunity before we get into the bullpen to remind you that we will be live at youtube.com/exit philosophy at the end of each Blue Jays playoff game. So Griff and I will be doing a live chat. You can stare at our faces as we talk. You can agree, you can disagree. Please don't be indifferent. Might even have to turn it up a notch, Griff.
Oh, I don't think
I might have to say things I don't believe in order to generate response. I'm going to have to Fox News myself here.
No, we don't do that here. We don't.
We don't. Yeah, we don't do that. We don't do that here. But we will be live after each and every Blue Jays playoff game. Can't wait. If you've been on a live YouTube broadcast before, or actually, watched one, you know that there's a scrolling live chat on the right-hand side of the screen. So please feel free to jump in with questions, comments. We want to interact with you. We want to have some laughs. We want to assuage your fears if game 1 doesn't go according to plan. But we will be live after each and every Blue Jays playoff game. Look for us the moment the Blue Jays game ends. And of course, they're playing at 4:38 Eastern time. That's 5:38 for my friends in the Atlantic time zone, and 1:38 in the afternoon Pacific time. So right in the middle of the workday for you. YouTube.com/exit philosophy. All right, relievers, because I said 14 and 12, right? 14 position players, 12 pitchers. We've got our 3 starting pitchers who are Gosman, Barrios, and Bassett. That means we've got 9 relievers. I wasn't very good at math come high school, but I do know that 12 minus 3 is 9. And so these names are all pretty obvious to me. Jordan Romano, Jordan Hicks, Tim Meza, Eric Swanson, Chad Green, Jimmy Garcia, Trevor Richards, Genesis Cabrera, and Yusei Kikuchi. There's really, outside of them going 13-13 and taking a 10th like Bowden Francis, Griff, these are all names that are, it's not like they're weighing, do we want these 2 guys versus these 2 guys? These 9 names are on the roster. The question would be whether they add a 10th.
Yeah, and that's a good list of 9 there. And like you said, when you have starting pitchers who go 100 pitches in 6 innings, you don't really need a 10th reliever, even if you have Kikuchi out there, because we believe that he will not be in the rotation for the 3 games, but he'll be able to carry up to 100 pitches in relief if they go extra innings. But what worries me about that bullpen group is the relative struggles of Romano and Hicks at the back end, and Cabrera and Trevor Richards. I mean, Cabrera doesn't look like the same guy who was lights out when he first came over from the Cardinals, and Hicks and Romano have struggled a little bit. I mean, could Swanson? There's no time to evolve and change your plans in terms of who's pitching the ninth inning. By that time, you'll be out of the playoffs, especially in a short series. But that's what concerns me about that bullpen group. On paper, it looks fabulous. It looks deep. It looks ready to go for deep into October. But in terms of the reality of what we saw the last couple of weeks, that's what concerns me.
Yeah. I mean, my view on this bullpen, Griff, is there are no surprises here. You and I have talked about Jordan Romano converted most of his save opportunities. Romano will show you things sometimes where you go, man, that was huge. Was it in, here I go not remembering anything, but in the last week or so, he had a 2-inning extra inning performance where he didn't allow a run.
Yeah, he had 2 ghost runners, and they didn't move in those 2 innings. That
right. I mean, that
best performance maybe of the season.
Yeah, that's really huge. That's important stuff. And then you get people who, I can't pitch in a tie game in the top of the 9th inning. He's not going to have to pitch in the top of the 9th inning of any game in Minnesota. But I can't come into a tie ball game and hold the score, blah blah blah. And I've said what I've said about Jordan Romano. I mean, he's a good closer. I don't put him in the elite category. Other people do. We'll just disagree on that. But he's good at his job. Jordan Hicks can throw the ball through a brick wall. The key with him is he's got to hit the brick wall when he throws. And so sometimes he catches too much of the plate. Anybody can hit velocity now. So you need to be able to change guys, levels, up, down, out, in. You got to be able to hit your spots, and you got to be able to wipe them out with something that breaks, that's probably 10, in some cases 15 miles per hour slower than your fastball. I mean, he's got the stuff. He just has to bring it consistently. And as for Genesis Cabrera, I mean, he was lights out when the Jays got him, but his larger body of work suggests that he's a guy that is going to be up and down. I mean, none of this surprises me with any of these guys.
Well, the presence of Cabrera in the bullpen has helped Tim Mayza tremendously, because he doesn't have to warm up in the 5th or 6th, because that's Cabrera's role. And so he doesn't have to warm up 3 times in a game before he comes in the 8th, Mayza. But with Jordan Hicks, I think that in terms of controlling his emotions on the mound, when things go, like when he gave up a home run, I think it was yesterday, the day before, it was yesterday, or on Sunday, he drops an F-bomb and puts his head in his glove, and it looks like he has trouble regaining his composure before throwing to the next hitter. And that's something that you really don't want to see from your closer. So that's why he wasn't a closer with the Cardinals regularly. And that's why Jordan Romano pitching to his capability is key for this, because like you said, you want a guy who can throw a ball through a brick wall coming in a clutch situation, and where he just needs an out or 2 with a couple of runners on base. You like him to throw strikes and throw 102. There's no doubt.
People crapped all over John Schneider for that intentional walk in the 10th inning of Saturday's game. In extra innings there, when the Rays scored 3 and ultimately won the game by 2.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was the unintentional walk of Taylor Walls, I believe, that followed. The light hitting 9th hitter. Was it Raimel Tapia? And then Taylor Walls got the two RBI single.
Yeah, I mean, he did.
You can't walk Raimel Tapia. You can't.
I asked the manager about when against the Yankees, when he walked Aaron Judge, and then Gleyber Torres blooped a single, and Stanton ran into a fastball and scored 2 runs, and it was a big 2 runs after the intentional walk to Aaron Judge. And the Blue Jays are 4th in the major leagues in intentional walks issued. So I went and asked, I think that was the 29th against the Rays, the 29th of the season. And no other contenders really are up that high. It's all scrub teams like the Rockies and the A's. And so I asked him about walking Judge, and he looked at me and he said, yeah, if I need to, I'll walk him 4 times intentionally today. And then he did walk him later in that game. But I would like to go back and see how, like, the batters in the inning following an intentional walk and just add up the total. Maybe I'll have that for our next podcast if it comes into play. But I'm not a big fan of, like, a guy's got a 70% chance of making it out if he's a 300 hitter. And I know Aaron Judge is great. And there are guys that you don't want to. Corey Seager, I think he walked him twice in extra innings in one game. But if a guy's if you gave me a 70% chance of winning something, I would take that in a heartbeat. But the fear of certain players makes him make the decision to put him on base, and a lot of times it hasn't worked out.
Yeah, but what kills that inning, Griff? And we watched him play for the Blue Jays for a full year last year.
Yeah, Raimel.
You have to try hard to walk Raimel Tapia. Like, outside of throwing up the 4 horsemen sign and just take your 4 and go to first base, like, you have to work at that. He's up there hacking.
Well, in his first 2 at bats, he got 2 base hits, and I thought he was on his way to a career day because he's got the how could they let me go type attitude about the Blue Jays. And that's and then so he wanted to swing at every pitch, but if it's not even close enough, he's got to walk. Crazy.
Like, it's the old thing with John Schneider. Like, I think if you had sat John Schneider down and said, look, if you intentionally walk the hitter who precedes Raimel Tapia, Hicks will walk Tapia, he'd go, well, then we better pitch to the 8-hole, whoever it was, right? Like, you're trusting Jordan Hicks to execute, and the Jays are going to have to trust him to execute because he's one of their top late game guys. So remember when I was suggesting that the Orioles bullpen would be on fumes by the postseason, and that's why they weren't going to win the division? Well, I think that it affects every team the same way. I mean, the workload that the Blue Jays have placed on their top relievers has been heavy, but not like overburdensome. But it looks like some of these guys have been affected by the number of innings and the number of appearances, the number of times they've warmed up. And that's true around the game. Yeah. And when you consider, Griff, how good the Jays starting rotation has been and how deep relative to most other teams their starters go into games on a pretty consistent basis. It would be really hard if I were a 23-year-old rookie reliever with electric stuff. It would be in the back of my mind, or probably, sir, in the back of my agent's mind, if it's not in mine, because I'm too young and dumb to know. Man, I can't blow this arm out before I make a couple of paydays in arbitration, because and that's why, I mean, it's been talked about forever. That's why year over year, relief pitchers can be so up and down. I mean, for every Mariano Rivera who was consistently excellent every single year, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of guys who ride the roller coaster, right? It's just the demand. What makes baseball different than the other sports is that I think baseball is the only sport where constantly people say, oh, the regular season's a marathon and the playoffs are a sprint. Like, if you're going to the Olympics as a sprinter, you don't have to win a marathon to qualify for the Olympics as a sprinter. And I was talking to Mark Topkin of the Rays beat yesterday, and he agreed that both the Rays and the Jays are built for a 162-game season. And so when you get to the playoffs, you get upsets because there are teams that have
two top tier starting pitchers, and all of a sudden they win games, and now they're in the driver's seat. And your depth of four guys, as the Jays have, four starters who each made over 30 starts, that means nothing in the postseason, because we've already talked about Kikuchi not even being in the rotation. And another team that has three top starters then has the advantage, because the Jays' depth has been nullified by the fact that it's become a sprint.
I want to touch, before we get into the position players, I want to touch on Kikuchi, because I think he's a, for lack of a better way to describe him, Griff, he's an as the series goes pitcher for the Blue Jays here. So what I mean by that is you have Tim Meza and you have Genesis Cabrera, and you also have Yusei Kikuchi from the left side. You could use Kikuchi in leverage, and he could be, because the Twins have a bunch of left-handed hitters. Like, they've got some pretty good left-handed hitters. So you've got three relief options from the left side in your bullpen. That's advantageous. The other part of it is, and this is why I really want them to go 14-12 and not 13-13. I want 14 position players, 12 pitchers, is that Kikuchi could be the guy who throws 3 or 4 innings in a game where you're either up big, and, you know, say Gosman's slogging, but he's doing well, but he's slogging like he sometimes does. So he's at like 100 pitches after 5 2/3 innings, but you're winning 10-1. So Gosman's got to come out after 6, and then Kikuchi could mop up the final 3 innings and save the rest of your bullpen for game 2. He could do that in a scenario like that if it presents itself, but he could also be one of your leverage guys.
Yeah, I'm looking at it more as if it allows John Schneider to have a very short leash with his starters. And we've seen even Bassett, even Gosman, even Barrios, if they're struggling through 3 innings, you would hesitate if you didn't have Kikuchi. And besides, when you have those right-handers, that means that the Twins will have loaded the lineup with left-handers. So if it's guys struggling after 3 innings and he's averaged 23 pitches per, so let's say he's 70, 75, and he's allowing base runners, but you're still in the game, then you can bring Kikuchi in to carry it through 7. You know, that's the way I'm looking at it. Not a 10-1 advantage or a 10-1 deficit, but a game where you need to have a short leash, because if you leave the guy in there, he might explode at any point. And we've seen it all season. They're just hoping it doesn't happen in this 3-game series, but if it does, having Kikuchi is a good insurance policy.
Yeah, and I think it'd be a bit of a Swiss Army knife for him. But yeah, that's the 9-man bullpen, and I'm eager to see 14-12. So
yeah,
so those are your 12. Those are your 12 pitchers: Gosman, Barrios, Bassett, Romano, Hicks, Meza, Swanson, Green, Garcia, Kikuchi, Richards, Cabrera. Catchers, obvious: Kirk, Heineman. So here's the question with this: Alejandro Kirk. When do you pinch run for him, Griff? Because if you pinch run for Alejandro Kirk, you've got Tyler Heineman in for the rest of that game, and it could come back around to his spot in the order, and it could be lefty on lefty, you know, with a Caleb Thielbar or somebody like that throwing to Tyler Heineman. I don't even know if you want Heineman up against a right-handed pitcher, but when, if at all, do you remove Alejandro Kirk from the ballgame?
I think you pinch run with Cam Eden in the 7th inning, no earlier than the 7th, definitely not the 6th or earlier. Pinch run in the 7th if you're behind a run. And like when I confronted when I asked the question of John Schneider about why he didn't pinch run for Kirk when he wasn't the go ahead or he wasn't the tying run, he snapped at that. And so we know that's going to be the strategy. It won't be if they're 2 runs down and he's on first base, although it should be. But yeah, I don't have a problem with Heineman behind the plate, but as you point out, if he comes up, if that spot comes up again, in later innings or in the 8th or 9th, or especially in the 9th, then that puts you at a disadvantage, because the only other catcher you got hasn't caught a game. When you obtained Dalton Varsho, it was like the hype was he's a great outfielder, but he can also be a third catcher. And that has not happened. He hasn't put the gear on once, and you wouldn't want it to happen in a game of importance in the playoffs.
Right. And we both understand this isn't even necessarily a conversation if Danny Jansen's healthy.
Right.
Right. Because you've got Jansen and Kirk. So if Kirk is starting a game and Jansen's on the bench, well, then you pinch run for Kirk and Danny Jansen comes in for the pinch runner and all is well. It's a very different dynamic when it's Heineman entering the lineup. That's the only thing you gotta run a risk.
What's impressed me since Danny Jansen went down with the injury, with the finger injury, is the durability. I didn't think that Alejandro Kirk could catch as much in consecutive games because he was never asked to do it before. But in a way, the repetition and the frequency of his at-bats and plate appearances has helped his hitting. And I've been waiting for him to show signs behind the plate of just running out of gas, and I like to say, running on fumes. But it hasn't happened. So I don't think it's a problem, especially with 3 afternoon games, as we all knew would happen with the U.S. networks. 3 afternoon games because they don't want the Jays in anybody's prime time, even
and
Colorado Buffaloes.
They also may not want the Twins. Right. But Minneapolis.
But at least the Twins have their affiliate networks in that city. The Blue Jays don't. So
that's right. We know. Look, I've just sort of written all of this out by position, but let's just focus on infielders, understanding that the designated hitter is among the infield outfield group. So you got Vlad, you got Brandon Belt, you got Kevin Biggio, Whit Merrifield, who I know doubles as an outfielder, but I'm including him as an infielder since second base is his natural position. I've got Davis Schneider on the roster, obviously Bo Bichette, and then you've got Matt Chapman and Santiago Espinal. So for me, I've got 8 infielders, which brings our position total to the 10 of 14, the 2 catchers and the 8 infielders here. And then my outfielders, Griff, because let's just wrap it all in. Kiermaier, Springer, Varsho, and I am including Cam Eden as the 14th position player to play the 2015 version of Dalton Pompey.
Absolutely. I mean, Cam Eden's role is clearly defined, as was Dalton Pompey. But I'm making a bold prediction here. So that Brandon Belt won't see the field other than as a DH. But my bold prediction is that Kevin Biggio will be the wild card series MVP.
Wow, I like that. Okay. So
I think he starts at second base, and if
I agree,
he's going to DH one day, Kevin plays first base, and if Springer's going to DH, Kevin plays right field. But he plays every day, and he is going to step up. And whether he's batting 4th or 5th in that lineup, he'd be batting 5th behind Bo, clearly. That he will step up and produce what they need to win that series.
Sonny Gray's right-handed. Pablo Lopez is right-handed. Based on what I've been reading, it seems like it's Joe Ryan and not Bailey Ober who's going to start the 3rd game, but that's Twins beat people projecting the roster. We don't know yet. It could be Bailey Ober, who I believe is 8.5 feet tall. But it's Joe Ryan or Bailey Ober, but they're all right-handed. So Kevin Biggio and the way he's been hitting, Griff, he's in the starting lineup, probably at second base, but wherever you put him. I mean, he's been, and full credit to him, because there are people out there who said he's a fringe major leaguer or maybe not necessarily a major leaguer. I've sometimes watched him and felt the same way when he's been in the depths of his struggles. But This is a guy who just comes to the ballpark each and every day. He never squawks when he gets 2 at-bats a week. He knows his role on the team. He waited it out. And when he started to get more opportunities in August, he hit. And when he started to hit, the opportunities started to increase. And he's wedged his way, full value for it, into this team's starting lineup against right-handed pitchers. And they're going to be seeing a bunch of righties.
Yeah, and I know someone who saw him in the Arizona Fall League when he was a kid. I saw him in New Hampshire when he was MVP of the Eastern League. And they said that he would never be a good defender, would never have a position to play regularly. But he has worked so hard. You see him before every game, every day, going out and working out at multiple positions. And he sees the lineup. If he's a right fielder, he goes and works in the outfield. But he has made some tremendous plays in right field, first base, and second base. And then he made the diving stop at third base where the ball was by him, and he reached back, got up quickly through. He has worked himself into being a good defender. He's a better defender at second base than Davis Schneider is. And he's producing more than Davis Schneider is right now. But Schneider works his zone and gives you a good at-bat. He's like the right-handed Brandon Belt in that regard, but he doesn't. He's not going to get much time on the field, but he will be on the roster. He should be on the roster, and he might be useful at some point.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I mean, Caleb Thielbar is a left-handed reliever for the Twins. Brent Hedrick, I mean, kind of a fringe guy. Giovanni Moran is injured. Right, he's probably the Twins' best left-handed reliever when he's healthy, but he's hurt. He's on the 60-day, and then there are names like Dallas Keuchel, who's also hurt.
Oh, please bring him in.
Yeah, what's that?
Please bring him into it.
Yeah, please bring him in. This is not like 2017 Houston Astros Cy Young Dallas Keuchel. It's Chicago White Sox, now Minnesota Twins Dallas Keuchel. But I mean, so there could be times here, Griff, where Thielbar's in and then Biggio's up and you got a decision to make. And is it an Espinal who pinch hits because you'd rather Espinal's glove in the field and you're feeling comfortable with Santiago Espinal? Or is it a Davis Schneider pinch hitting because Schneider's somebody you feel has a better shot at hitting a 2-run bomb when you need it?
Yeah.
Right? Like you kind of play it as it comes.
And the thing about your suggestion of 14 position players is that it doesn't have to be the same guy. You don't have to go, I'm got to pinch hit somebody who's staying in the game. You can have someone pinch hit and then the better defender go into the game. So that's an advantage. And to me, like 14, a 5-man bench is something that I grew up with in the game, sometimes 6-man bench. And so, like, the more position players that are in that dugout, I think the better it is for the team. And so in this situation where you need a hitter and a fielder, it doesn't have to be the same guy.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. How would you, now that it's over, how would you describe the totality of his regular season, Griff?
I would describe it as he feels more frustration than the fan base does, or the fans don't feel more frustration than Vlad Guerrero Jr. He knows what he can do. He knows who he is. He lets umpires get in his head. If they call one pitch 4 inches off the plate, he feels like he's got to protect that, and then a guy will throw him a slider away and he'll swing at it. He's streaky only because his mind is streaky. Like, if he gets in a proper groove, he's tough to get out. He gives you great swings, great at bats. But if he gets in that other side of the streak, you or I could get him out likely. Well, maybe not. But I think personal frustration is what has happened to him this season, or is the hallmark of his season.
So you got bold and said Kevin Biggio is going to be the wild card round MVP in the Blue Jays advance. I think the Twins are going to win this series, Griff, but I will throw a but in there. And it's not just a but, it's a guarantee.
Okay.
It's a guarantee. If the Blue Jays win this series, you and I are going to do an Exit Philosophy special edition on Friday, and we are going to look at a stat line for Vlad Jr. over 2 or 3 games that's excellent.
Okay.
If the Blue Jays lose in 2 or 3 games, you and I are going to do an Exit Philosophy episode special edition on Friday, and Vlad will be, if I'm being generous, pedestrian at best or a non-factor.
So I'm suggesting that Kevin Biggio is MVP, and you're suggesting that Vlad is MIP, most important player.
Well, and what he needs to be. Can I step off camera for a second?
Yeah, feel free.
Because people are listening on the audio platforms, but if you're watching on YouTube, I'll be back in 2 seconds. I should have come prepared here, but it's just over here in the corner. Give me a minute.
I could fill in singing Prince's 1999. So
we need the mop.
We're partying like it was 1993 yesterday after their win.
This is the mop, Griff. I found a mop. Remember last week? The most outstanding player? The Exit Philosophy mop. We need Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to be the mop for this Blue Jays team.
Nothing better than an audio podcast with props.
Hey, we have an Exit Philosophy page on YouTube.
Oh,
That's why I'm doing it for the people who watch us, Griff. Who do it for the people who watch us.
Those who are listening may be tempted now to go on and watch because they haven't seen the prop.
Yeah, they want to. I mean, who amongst us in our lives hasn't said, the one thing I'd like is that MacArthur guy to hold a mop on YouTube so that I can go, and then I got to scroll because they're like an hour into this thing. All right, where's he holding the mop? But yes, we need Vlad Jr. to be the Toronto Blue Jays mop this week, and if he is, you and I will be happy on Friday, and if he isn't, they're going home, Griff. It's time. Yeah. And somebody responded to me on Twitter with a very good point. Am I still allowed to call it Twitter? Somebody responded to me a couple weeks ago on Twitter and said, look, Vlad's 24 years old. He's still one of the youngest players on this Blue Jays team. Like, we've got to remember that. And that is true. That is true. But he is also 2 years away from free agency, when he will still be one of the youngest players on this Blue Jays team, and he will be looking to get paid big time money. So, youth, yes, but in terms of major league experience, he's been around, and he wants the responsibility of this role, and he wants to be paid to hold the responsibility of this role, either for the Blue Jays or for another team for the next 10 to 15 years. Now's the time, Griff. Now's the time.
Yeah, and just to that point of 2 years from now, cashing in, how much it is depends on his performance in the next 2 years. But you're talking like $7 or $8 million a year difference if he does not step up and be the player that everyone is expecting him to be. And that's not chump change when we're talking about, it may look like it, and we've all got like blasé about the numbers that are out there, but that's a tremendous difference, and it all depends on him. And as when you're talking about still one of the youngest players, I like to point out when I'm asking John Schneider questions that Davis Schneider is 2 months older than Vlad. So everybody's talking about the kids coming up and blah, blah, the Buffalo kids. And I said to Schneider, do you think Vlad ever looks at some of the older players and the way that they manage the plate discipline like Davis Schneider? And he laughed. One of the few times he laughed.
It is true. Yeah. But to your point, Griff, like, if it's a difference of $7 or $8 million per year on the life of a 12-year contract, that's $100 million in totality. Like, that's That's the difference between 2 and 3 or 250 and 350. Like, I mean, I just.
And if he, to your point, if he is the, what's the MOP stand for? Most
Outstanding player,
Yeah,
which actually is an award in the CFL.
Yeah, right. Maybe we'll do a podcast, CFL podcast.
There you go. You could, I'll be Argos guy, you be Alouettes guy.
So if the Blue Jays go deep into this October and say even reach the ALCS and have to go to Tampa or Texas, say they reach deep into October, I think that creates a situation where Vlad's contract is bumped accordingly. Like Vlad will make his money if this team moves forward, because you're saying that he will be an important part of that process of that winning.
You hate the Baltimore Orioles. You didn't even consider them an option for the ALCS.
Well, it's when
they have to go to Tampa or Texas. There's just no love for Brandon Hyde's.
I'm not a fan of the fumes when I go to Baltimore. I accuse the bullpen of being on fumes, but you walk through that town and you get above the Inner Harbor, and you're on fumes right there.
You're on fumes. Yeah, it's you want to stay in the Inner Harbor if you're in Baltimore.
Yeah.
The Inner Harbor of Baltimore is actually, it's beautiful. You got the ballpark there. You got the Ravens Stadium.
Yeah.
But
1979 World Series was the first date I went on with my current wife, well, my only wife, and it was during the World Series. Game 1 got snowed out, and we went looking for a restaurant. I couldn't find anything. The Inner Harbor hadn't been built yet, so there was some old steakhouse, and I was looking over my shoulder all the time. And
Memorial Stadium was not on the water.
No, it wasn't. No, yeah. But the hotel was. I stayed at the. I forget what it was, but when I went back to Baltimore, it had become a Radisson. So I walked through the door of the hotel. I said, I've been here. It was the Lord Baltimore at the time. I walked through the door and I said, I've been here. And I looked at the staircase, and it was where I first saw my wife. And I went, oh my God, that's the staircase. And in my mind, I saw Debbie, and I said, wow, what a beautiful woman she was and is. So better make sure of that. And then I called home when I got to the room. I said, Debbie, you won't believe this. I'm in the Lord Baltimore. It's now a Radisson. And I saw the stairs where you were standing when I saw you and fell in love. And she went, so like after all those years, things have changed. Things changed a lot.
That was your sign. That was your George Costanza moment. I love you. Let's get something to eat.
Anyway, that's my riff for the day.
That's cool. So you met Debbie in Baltimore?
No, she was from here. She was working at the World Series, and I was working at the World Series, but we didn't know each other. So I just saw her. The snow came down, and I asked her out.
All right, and then We Are Family, right? 1979 Pittsburgh Pirates, the We Are Family Pirates, right?
Absolutely.
But the other part of that is what? See, because I was born in 79, Griff, so I was like 3.5 months old when that World Series started. It snowed in Baltimore in early October?
Yeah, game 1 was snowed out, and everybody was just like, what do we do now? And I think that it ate into the off day, and so that was probably the advantage Orioles early, because they took a lead, and then the Pirates stormed back and won in 7. So
wow, so it snowed in Baltimore that early in the year. Wow. Okay. Well, that ain't happening anymore in this day and age. So you've got the Jays winning. I don't care about 2 or 3 games unless you want to get really in deep on the predictions here. But you got the Jays winning the series. I'm saying the Twins will win the series. But the caveat for me is if Vlad has a week or a series, then he can push the Jays over the top. But as they go, or as he goes, they will go.
Yeah, and I'm saying Kevin Biggio, and I'll go with you on Vlad. So those are the 2 most important players for the Blue Jays, and I think that in terms of starting rotation, I think that the Jays have an edge in that, even though, because to me, the AL Central was a combined 90 games under 500. So the final month of the season in September, I know that the only two teams that the Twins played who were contenders was a 3-game series against Tampa Bay and a 3-game series against the Cincinnati Reds, who were sort of moonwalking out of the picture at that point. So, maybe we're giving too much credit to the rotation for being able to carve their way through September when it was also ran teams maybe playing youngsters.
Possibly, but also there are fewer division games played now, right?
I like that rousing support. Possibly.
No, possible. But they won a bad division, the Twins did, but you don't play your divisional opponents 19 times anymore. You play them 13 times each, and you get to feast on the Tigers and the Royals, and the White Sox lost 100 games and all of that. I get it. But you are also
playing
the Dodgers.
Yeah. So here's the last 3 series that the Twins played for the season.
Yeah. Okay.
The LA Angels, the Oakland A's, and the Colorado Rockies. That's their last 3 series. Now they're setting up for the postseason. They got to crank it up and get into a competitive, high stakes mode. And the Jays have been there pretty much all season because they play in a division that was 100 games over 500.
And by the way, because I expressed concern last week about the weather in Minneapolis, no problem tomorrow. It is going to be 29 Celsius on Tuesday in Minneapolis. So it's going to be summertime in the city. And I think Wednesday is still like 21 or 22. So none of the weird stuff that can happen in the northern climes at this time of year is going to be affecting Minnie this week. Weather will not be a factor. And I don't think there's any rain in the forecast except for later Tuesday evening when the game should be over because it's a 3:38 local time start.
If it's not over, then Kikuchi will be pitching at that point.
Yes, Kikuchi will be pitching. And by the way, my last thought on Vlad, I'm not saying Vlad has to go 7 for 12 in the series. He could go 2 for 12. But if the 2 is a 2 or a 3-run home run that turns a 1-run deficit into a 2-run lead, and if the other hit is a bases clearing double, for example, get back to Vlad in moments, big moments. So if he has a couple of big hits in this series, whether it's an extra base hit or a home run is also an extra base hit, but you know what I mean, whether it's a double, a home run, whatever the case may be, I don't need him to go 6 or 7 for 12, but if he can step up in run producing situations, Griff, and get it done, I'm talking about that as much as I am his batting average.
One aspect that I haven't delved into is that could be a factor is that, remember in 2020, Bo made 2 errors in 1 inning at shortstop. I think that he is playing shortstop as well as probably 90% of the major league shortstops at this point. He makes some plays going to his right that are really amazing plays for any shortstop. And Bo has stepped up his defense. I used to be among the group that said, well, maybe he's going to have to change his position. And that's not the case anymore. He is a shortstop. And so you look at 2020, if he hadn't made those 2 errors, if he had been this shortstop, then what would have happened? And then you look at last year, that debacle against the Mariners, that's not Bo's ball that dropped in and created the situation. But I think if Kevin Kiermaier was in center field, Kevin Kiermaier makes that catch. So the Blue Jays defense is as good and solid now as it has ever been. And therefore, that could be a factor in making a difference too over 2020 and 2022. So I forgot to mention Bo's defense, but it's really, along with Kevin's defense. And you've got a Gold Glover at third base, although he's been a little off this season. And Vlad handles himself so well at first base, makes some plays that, get you out of your seat. So, I think they're in position. If they don't do it, then maybe we blame the manager. That seems to be popular.
Could be. We'll be prepared to comment on whatever it is we witness. And we'll do that live after each and every game on our YouTube page, youtube.com/exitphilosophy. And it is a live stream, and there will be a chat forum. So you are welcome to join us at youtube.com/exitphilosophy and chime in. We'll interact with you. We'll answer your questions if you have them. Come by, say hi, we'll wave, we'll talk. And
Tuesday
it'll be after
morning,
each and every Blue Jays game.
Tuesday morning, there will be a posted column on a preview of every series in the wild card round on griffsthepitch.com.
Yes.
So if you've never been to that site, have a look. There's a lot of previous stuff that is prescient and smart. And I don't think I've ever been wrong. So here we go.
Yeah, well, and I, you know me, I have the memorized line at griffsthepitch.com. But you see, now it's all different because we're in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
So is it still multiple weekly Blue Jays and MLB columns, or are we expanding outward playoffs now?
No, we're doing playoffs. We're doing previews of individual series. We're doing maybe wrap-ups of the individual games that aren't our lead into our YouTube discussions and forums. I don't even know what you call them. What do you call them?
That works.
Okay. So we don't need to get into the details of griffsthepitch.com since this is the first year. Everything is new. So what's new is new.
But you do have some really cool conversations. Ex-Expos, current and ex-Blue Jays like Steve Rogers, Moises Alou. You've got a lot of cool conversations, one-on-one conversations that you can't hear anywhere else. So griffsthepitch.com. Before we wrap this up, Griff, and we'll kind of bullet point it just because we're running on solid time here already. The three other wild cards.
That was what I would suggest before we sign off.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to throw in, and I can too, if something comes to mind, a comment or a thought on the series, we can do that. But let's just rifle through winners here. The Texas Rangers did not win the American League West, which makes them the second wild card, as the Jays are the third and final wild card spot. And so that forces Texas to travel to Tampa Bay. I look at this series this way, Griff. Perhaps it's an oversimplification. I don't feel it is. This is going to be trouble for Bruce Bochy's team from the fifth or sixth inning on. Their bullpen is, if not injured, otherwise a mess. And they are going to struggle late in games against the Rays. And I would not be surprised if Tampa Bay takes this series by Wednesday. The only way it doesn't happen is if the Rangers offense absolutely unloads and builds big leads early in games.
I'm going the other way. I'm going with Bochy from his postseason experience, and I know that Kevin Cash has postseason experience and that team does, but they're missing so many valuable components. They got through the season like I don't know how, but I'm taking the Rangers. Their offense is tremendous, and I think that did you see Pete Fairbanks try and close games out late
against the Jays? It was
it's
a true Adventureland. Yeah,
so I'm taking the Rangers in that. And what do you got next? We got Diamondbacks at the Brewers. Who do you like?
Well, as a Chicago Cubs fan and as a San Francisco 49ers fan in the NFL, which means I don't like the Green Bay Packers, I typically have an aversion to rooting for or picking anything from the state of Wisconsin. So in the absence of true analysis, I'm going to go with Gabby Moreno and the Arizona Diamondbacks to win this series. But, I mean, you got Gallen, you got Kelly. The Diamondbacks have some good young pitchers. I don't think we pay a lot of attention. I also love the Torey Lovullo story where they stuck with him He's a good guy, good baseball guy. He came in, they were pretty good. They were a wild card playoff team. Then they really went south, lost 100 games, had to rebuild it back up. They're now back on the upswing. He survived the whole valley. They're back climbing toward the peak. This is a fun team. Corbin Carroll's going to be the National League Rookie of the Year. I know that Woodruff and Burns are at the top of a very stout Brewers rotation. Freddie Peralta's in there too. But I am going to go probably hard overhead a little bit, but I'm going to go with the Arizona Diamondbacks on the road.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Brewers, the hometown Brewers. I think that they were built more for a sprint, and this is a sprint. We'll figure out the next series whether they can do a 5-game, but I think a 3-game series, the Brewers at home with their starting pitching is going to carry the day.
But what about the Brewers winning a weak division, Griff? Oh, maybe the Cubs and Reds came on a little bit.
Yeah, that division finished at or just above 500. It's not like finishing 100 games below 500 like the AL Central did.
And the Pirates actually
bounced back from they played well, then they struggled badly, then they bounced back at the end. So yeah,
they played better. They played better.
Don't compare the two Centrals just because they have the same last name.
Oh, okay, and just because they're all in the Midwest. Speaking of the Pirates, the Miami Marlins played the Pirates the final weekend of the season, and the Marlins had a big comeback victory in Pittsburgh. They were down 3-0 late Friday night and stormed back to win 4-3, and that more or less clinched it for Miami and pushed the Chicago Cubs out. Marlins at Phillies. Again, a little bit of heart with hoping the best for Rob Thompson, the Canadian manager of the Phillies. But I do like Nola and Wheeler. I think the back end of the Phillies bullpen is strong. And, I'm just not going to go against Bryce Harper and Kyle. If I'm not striking out, I'm hitting a home run or walking Schwarber. I think the Phillies have the pieces here to deal with the Marlins and advance to the division series.
Yeah, Scotty, I mean, we've seen so many times where a team that wasn't expected or is a surprise entry into the postseason, they're just happy to be there. And as talented and as exciting to watch as the Marlins are, I think that they've accomplished their goal by making the playoffs this year. They've got some great young players. Their future is bright, and they've got a couple of injuries on their starting pitching rotation. So looking to 2024, I could see them going deeper into October, but the Phillies are not going to be beat at home by a young Marlins team that's just happy to be there.
Yeah, and I mean, Sandy Alcantara, really hope that he finds his way back to health and back into that Marlins rotation in 2024, because he's a hell of a pitcher, and they're gonna, I mean, they have missed him. They are going to be reminded of why they miss him this week, not having him to pitch a game against the Phillies. So you've got the Jays, I've got the Twins. That's not who I'm cheering for, by the way. That's my pick. You've got the Rangers, I've got the Rays. You've got the Brewers, I've got the Diamondbacks, and we both agree that the Phillies will beat the Marlins. So there's good, healthy disagreement, and we'll be able to break it all down. Special edition of Exit Philosophy on Friday. So we will bring you an Exit Philosophy episode on Friday after the Wild Card Series, before the Division Series. We hope we're previewing a Blue Jays DS with the Houston Astros at that point. And remember, at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy, Griff and I will go live immediately after each and every Blue Jays playoff game. So the games in Minnesota are locked in, at least the first two games are, at 4:38 Eastern Time, 1:38 Pacific. After the final out is recorded, youtube.com/Exit Philosophy, Griff and I will be going live, breaking it down, chatting with you, taking your questions, taking your comments, and we'll be sharing with you what we watched. So we're looking forward to doing that, and it will start as we sit here on Monday, October the 2nd, tomorrow, Tuesday, October the 3rd, after the final pitch is thrown in Game 1 of the Blue Jays and Twins.
Thanks, Scotty, and thanks everyone for tuning in and for listening or watching on YouTube.